Rishi Sunak thinks that we borrowed way too much money and somebody's going to have to pay the cost of all of the public money that we have been wasting because of the COVID pandemic. Some people think the rich don't pay enough tax.
There's no accountability. There's no respect for the British taxpayers' money.
Other people think the poor pay too much tax.
You've got who puts his money in offshore accounts and then asks for a bailout from our government, presumably to cover his legal costs of sexual harassment.
Today, we'll be trying to find out whether the rich pay enough. This is the Political Punch-Up. Welcome to the Political Punch-Up on Talk Radio TV. Today, I'm joined by two stalwarts of Talk Radio, Belinda, the former MEP from the Brexit Party, and Dave Chawner, a comedian who's more used to working with Julia Hartley-Brewer. So this is going to be a much less painful experience for you, I have to say. Today, the Political Punch-Up is all about tax, because we've just seen Boris Johnson make a barnstorming speech to the Conservative Party conference. And the big question is, right, should the rich pay more tax? So I'm going to come to both of you for 30 seconds to make your arguments. First of all, Belinda, why don't you kick us off? Should the rich pay more tax?
Right. No, I don't think they should pay more tax. I do not think that's the answer. While there is such a culture of waste in governments across their departments, billions are being wasted every year by mismanagement, and they go for the lazy option and keep hitting the public purse again. Rich people are rich enough to have properties all over the world. They'll just leave. They'll move their businesses. There's going to be no point doing that. We need to make sure the government spends our pennies wisely. They're unaccountable for so much wastage. $1 billion gets wasted on Mr. NHS appointments. 5.6 billion, the taxpayers' allowance said last year, was wasted by government departments. There's no accountability. There's no respect for the British taxpayers' money. And I really think the British people would feel much more comfortable about paying taxes if we thought they were being used wisely instead of this lazy attitude of constant, endless money that you can just hit the public with. No, start spending it wisely. There should be a cross-party organisation that keeps an eye on checks and balances to make sure government departments spend money wisely. At the moment, they are not, and they are getting away with it. Raising taxes is not the answer.
Dave Chawner, Belinda makes a pretty good point. She says they're already wasting all the money they get already. Why should the rich pay any more tax?
Well, I don't see any problem with that. Let's actually use the tax money wisely and let's tax the rich. Ultra-wealthy people saw their profits grow over the pandemic while the rest of us had to fight for our jobs. We've got Richard Branson, who asked the government for £500 million to bail out his airline. And then yet months later, he decides to jet off into space, spending billions to literally spaff it up the wall. You've got who puts his money in offshore accounts and then asks for a bailout from our government, presumably to cover his legal costs of sexual harassment. Taxing them a bit more means that actually they might not eat caviar 5 times a day. And boo frickety who, when we're talking about universal credit being cut by £20 and that being the difference between some people eating and some people starving, I think it's okay to pump for the fat cats. Because if you're a single parent working multiple 0-hour contract jobs, facing those cuts to universal credit, rising fuel bills, you probably don't have the leisure time to look up tax loopholes like Bono or Vince Cable does. And actually, why should I be honest on my tax return when Google, Facebook, other big companies pay more on desk furniture than they do tax? And not only do I think that we should tax the rich because it's a fairer system, I think we should tax the rich more because I'm poor.
Well, I mean, that's an interesting argument to make, but Dave Chawner thinks we should tax the rich because he hasn't got any money. Well, that's not really their fault, Dave, is it? You just need to get a better job and work a little bit harder. The problem for me, Belinda, right, is that whenever you hear the lefties talking about taxing the rich, when you ask them, well, how rich is rich, they usually start at about 60 grand, which is a very, very small salary if you happen to be trying to support a family living in London.
Well, the problem is they're punishing the wrong people. The politics of envy has never worked out well for the British people, however rich or poor anyone is. The massive exodus of rich people in the 70s, when they were hammered with 70% tax, really harmed our country. It stopped investment. There's a reason why Google headquarters are in Dublin at the moment. It's because of their low tax. And people like Richard Branson and all the rest, you can jeer and sneer at them, but they have brought so many jobs to this country. They have paid millions and millions in tax. And I think without taking the governments, Labour and Tory, to account over their wastage. I mean, that 300 million gets wasted every year on doctors prescribing medicines patients don't even use. No one says reform that. They say, yeah, let's just get at the rich again. The rich aren't bad people because they're rich. Okay, and I just think we should stop being angry and jealous of people who've done far better than ourselves and think actually it's great they choose this country to live in. And yes, pay a little bit more if you can, but don't punish them. Don't direct your anger at them. Direct it at the government that's been wasting your money for years.
I think that's a good point, Dave. Let's start with you then, Dave. You were just nodding your head there when she was saying that basically the rich are not bad people. Do you think rich people are bad?
Oh, all of them. Every single one of them. I hate them. And also, how dare Belinda tell me who to hate? I will hate who I want. And also, I don't have to choose. I can hate the government and the rich. I don't think she understands how there is no end to my resources of hatred. But also, a study from the London School of Economics only last December showed that tax cuts on the right did not lead to significant increases in competitiveness or GDPR. Actually, all it led to was greater inequality between the top 1% and your average Joe. And actually, I think that I kind of agree with the fact that, yeah, perhaps tax is misspent and stuff, but I think that's a false equivalent. Why can't we actually streamline and use tax money better and also tax the people who have the most money and are more likely to use legal loopholes in order to become more of a fat cat?
Well, it's a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy, Belinda, isn't it? Because the people who already use legal loopholes to avoid paying tax will continue to use legal loopholes to avoid paying tax, won't they?
They'll just leave. And I don't really understand it, because if you are saying, oh, you should do both, what incentive is there for a government to bother checking if they're using the most expensive people or not of agency staff? What incentive is there for Matt Damon, who wasted hundreds of millions of pounds on faulty test kits, or the millions that were misspent on wrong PPE gear? There is a culture in government, in our departments, among our civil service. I work for a government department. I know how rife it is of not giving a shiitake mushroom about the taxpayers' money and about wasting it as if it's just, money on trees. If that changed, we wouldn't have to raise taxes. We're wasting billions and billions, and we should stop paying billions to countries in foreign aid that have space programs and blooming nuclear programs. That's for a start.
Right.
And start helping out our own a bit. Lower taxes increases investment, business opportunities, and actually it's punching the middle class at the moment, not the super rich. The super rich get away with murder whatever you do. So actually it won't work out that way. We have to have a low tax country and money better spent.
Now, when you said Matt Damon, Belinda, did you mean Matt Hancock? Because, I know Matt Damon could get the blame for a lot of things, but I don't really think it was his fault that we bought the PPE that wasn't any good. But listen, if you've just spent the morning watching The Bourne Identity because you're so wealthy, then that's fine. I'm not going to argue with you. Now, Dave Chawner, why don't you tell us exactly where your threshold would be? Because if you want to tax the rich, how much do you want to tax them? And at what point does the higher rate kick in?
I think like the top 1%. I think that is completely feasible, and actually it still incentivizes people to do a good job and make more money. And when Belinda's saying like, what incentive is there from the government? Well, votes. And that is literally their job. That is your incentivization of why to do this. All we're doing at the moment is just incentivizing dodgy bookkeeping. What we actually should be doing is creating a fair culture for everyone so that everyone wants to strive, rather than people at the bottom, the 99% of us thinking, well, there's no point. I'm never going to scramble out of this barrel because I feel like we're being pushed down by Marie Antoinette. I think Boris is 2 steps away from saying, let them eat cake at this point.
Yeah, well, I mean, what about the fact that 1% and the top 1% of taxpayers actually pay about 35% of the tax already? And you still haven't given me a figure for what the top rate of tax will be. So what is it?
100 grand.
No, I mean, what's the rate?
Oh, 50%.
50%. Well, that was what it was under George Osborne, isn't it? So you're not actually going that far left. I mean, also ask Jeremy Corbyn whether actually taxing the rich gets you any votes, because I think you'll find he didn't get any votes at the last election and he wanted to tax the rich out of the country.
Yeah, I think your problem, Mike, is that you're coming to me with facts and figures, whereas I have just blind assumptions.
Well, I mean, there is that. I'm afraid at the moment you're losing the argument. Belinda, give me your final say-so on what we should be doing instead. You said we should be more efficient, but should we change the tax system and actually lower people's taxes?
Are you asking me?
Yes.
Yes. Listen, I basically think we should go after the tax dodgers. No problem about that at all. I think we should be encouraging big businesses to come and invest and come and settle over here and lower taxes so we get more jobs over here. And you talk about the 1%. They pay for most of the public sector, even though they use private health, private schools. You know, they do their money's worth. And I think this hatred of success and bringing the top people down to the bottom of your level, it will kill off the entrepreneur, the creativity of this country. People want to come and build their businesses in the UK because we're not a high tax company. And I think politics of envy will spoil that. If the government just spent it wisely, we wouldn't have to raise taxes. And I think that the poor shouldn't pay taxes either. So
no.
There we go.
Final point from you, Dave. Would you raise the level of tax where it starts so that you could maybe make £20,000 before you pay any tax at all?
Yeah, I'd absolutely love that. It means I'd pay diddly squat. I think at the moment things are going to be hard. I welcome that. Mike Graham for Prime Minister, I say, if that's what you're running with.
Listen, I know how to be popular, but you're going to hear a bell ringing now, and then I'm going to give you my verdict on whether you or Belinda won this argument.
Okay.
So, having listened to both of you, Dave, by your own admission, you have absolutely no facts and figures. You just made a load of assumptions. You hate everybody by your own admission. You told me that you don't want to pay any tax at all, but you want anybody who's better off than you to look after you. So I think by that nature, you have lost the argument big time. And I don't think I've ever seen a bigger margin of victory. Belinda DeLucy has absolutely crushed you. So it's Belinda 1, Dave 0. We'll see you next time. Well, that was great, wasn't it? I really enjoyed that. If you did, there's lots more like it. Have a look over here.